You ever wonder why lately the narcissist's power over you doesn't feel the same? Why their words don't sting like before, and their presence doesn't drain you the way it used to? That's not coincidence. That's divine interference. Something supernatural is happening behind the scenes. God is stepping in to break the demonic hold that once kept you confused, weak, and tied to their chaos. You may feel strange shifts, moments of peace after long storms, sudden emotional distance, or doors closing without explanation. But what if those aren't losses? What if they're signs that heaven is moving on your behalf? Stay with me until the end, because I'm about to reveal 4 powerful signs that God Himself is breaking the narcissist's spiritual control over your life. And by the last one, you'll realize the battle has already been won. If you've ever felt unseen, manipulated, or spiritually attacked, this message is for you. And before we dive in, take a second to subscribe and comment "God is freeing me" below, because when you speak it, you claim it. Now, let's uncover what happens when the demons start losing.
There comes a quiet moment after the storm when something inside you shifts. You can't explain it right away, but you feel different, lighter, more aware, almost as if your soul has been quietly whispering, "Wake up, it's time." This is what happens when God begins to break the narcissist's demonic hold over your life. For so long, you lived under confusion, second-guessing yourself, walking on eggshells, feeling small under the weight of their manipulation. Every word they spoke carried hidden poison, designed to twist your reality and make you question your own worth. But now, something sacred is happening. The fog is lifting. The confusion that once clouded your mind starts to fade, and for the first time in a long while, you begin to see things clearly. Not through the lens of fear, but through the light of truth. That's not random. That's divine clarity. God is restoring your spiritual vision. He's pulling you out of the illusion the narcissist built, a false world where they were the center and you were made to orbit around their ego. For years, you might have believed their lies, that you weren't enough, that you were hard to love, that everything was your fault. But when God steps in, those lies lose their power. You begin to recognize how deep the manipulation ran, how they used guilt to control you, silence to punish you, and charm to confuse you. And yet none of it works anymore. The spell is breaking because God's light exposes everything that was meant to remain hidden. This awakening doesn't always happen loudly. Sometimes it's a slow, sacred unfolding, like dawn breaking after a long night. You start noticing patterns you never saw before. You begin to see that every time you felt crazy, you were actually reacting to real deceit. You realize that your instincts were never wrong, they were just buried under fear and self-doubt. The narcissist's greatest weapon was always confusion, making you believe that you couldn't trust your own mind. But when God restores your clarity, confusion loses its grip. What used to drain you now feels powerless. What used to intimidate you now feels small. You begin to stand taller, not because the narcissist changed, but because you did. This is divine intervention, a spiritual awakening that cuts through the illusion. You start to understand that this battle was never just emotional or psychological, it was deeply spiritual. The narcissist's behavior carried a darkness that fed off your empathy, your kindness, your willingness to forgive. But now, your spirit is no longer available for that kind of energy. God is sealing the cracks in your soul, the ones that allowed manipulation to enter in the first place. Where you once absorbed their pain, now you reflect their darkness back to them. They can no longer pull energy from you because God has closed that channel. You feel it, that strange mix of peace and strength, like being rebuilt from the inside out. And even though part of you might grieve the illusion, the dream of who you hoped they were, your deeper self knows this awakening is freedom. You start craving silence instead of chaos, solitude instead of validation. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't want to understand. You realize that peace doesn't need to be defended, it only needs to be protected. That's what happens when God restores your vision. You stop chasing closure and start choosing clarity. You no longer need their apology because you see the truth behind their mask. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The narcissist will sense this shift too. They'll notice that you no longer react to their provocations. You don't feed the arguments, you don't fall for the bait, and you don't beg for their love. To them, it feels like losing control, because spiritually, that's exactly what's happening. The demonic energy that once empowered them is losing its influence. Their manipulation was never truly their own strength. It was fueled by something darker, a spirit of deception, control, and pride. But when God enters your life, His light becomes a weapon. Darkness can't survive where light is present. Every lie they spoke now crumbles under the weight of truth. Every emotional chain they wrapped around you begins to break link by link. And through it all, you begin to rediscover yourself. You remember the version of you that existed before the trauma, the one who laughed freely, trusted naturally, and loved deeply without fear. That's the real you God is bringing back. This awakening is not about revenge or proving anything. It's about remembering who you were before the manipulation began. You start hearing God's voice louder than the narcissist's voice. His truth begins to replace their lies. Instead of questioning your worth, you start feeling chosen, guided, and protected. This is the moment where healing begins. Not when the narcissist apologizes, but when you stop waiting for it. You understand that your power was never in changing them, it was always in changing your perspective. God is showing you that freedom isn't about escaping a person, it's about breaking a spiritual tie. And once that tie is broken, everything changes. You'll notice peace in places where there used to be chaos. You'll feel joy for no reason at all. You'll find yourself forgiving not because they deserve it, but because you refuse to carry their darkness any longer. Every small step forward, every moment you choose calm over reaction, prayer over panic, and truth over illusion is a sign of divine progress. It's not weakness, it's spiritual maturity. The narcissist control depended on your confusion. Once clarity enters, their power dies. That's why this awakening feels both painful and freeing. Painful because you're confronting everything you once ignored. Freeing because you finally understand that the confusion was never yours to carry. It was planted there to keep you blind. But you're not blind anymore. So when you feel that deep sense of awareness, that sudden stillness that wasn't there before, don't dismiss it. That's God moving within you. That's the Holy Spirit untangling the lies and reminding you of your truth. The narcissist didn't change, you did. And that shift within you is the greatest evidence that the demonic hold is breaking. What was once a stronghold has now become a story of survival, redemption, and renewal. You're not just waking up, you're rising. The same clarity that once felt impossible is now your greatest protection. You no longer see through the lens of fear, but through the eyes of faith. You know now that God never left you. He was simply waiting for the moment you'd see yourself through His eyes again. That's the real miracle, when you realize that clarity is not just a sign of healing, it's a sign of divine favor. The narcissist power fades, the confusion ends, and you finally come home to your truth.
There comes a moment in your healing when something quietly shifts. The same tricks that once left you broken and confused suddenly stop working. You notice it first in the little things. The narcissist tries to guilt-trip you, twisting your kindness against you like they always have. But instead of feeling crushed, you feel calm. You see through it. You recognize the pattern, the manipulation, the fake remorse that always led back to control. It's almost strange. The words are the same, the tone is the same, but the effect is gone. That's not weakness leaving you. That's the power of God strengthening your spirit. The demonic influence that once operated through them is losing its grip. For so long, their tactics worked because you cared. You had empathy, and they used it like a weapon. They fed on your desire to fix things, to understand them, to prove your love. But now it feels different. Their charm no longer hypnotizes you. The compliments sound empty, the apologies feel rehearsed, and the sudden affection after hurting you only makes you suspicious. That's spiritual discernment awakening, the ability to see beyond the surface, to sense the energy behind the words. God's light is exposing the truth they tried to bury. You're no longer emotionally blindfolded. Even the silent treatment, once their favorite weapon, begins to lose power. What used to send you spiraling with anxiety now gives you peace. You don't chase, you don't beg, you don't try to fix the silence. You understand that the silence isn't punishment anymore, it's protection. Every time they withdraw, you grow stronger. Every time they try to manipulate your emotions, you realize how little control they actually have. God has placed a spiritual shield over your heart, and that shield cannot be penetrated by guilt, charm, or fear. And this is where the narcissist begins to panic. They sense the loss of control long before they admit it. They may increase their efforts, more love bombing, more blame shifting, more dramatic apologies, but you stay grounded. You respond with peace instead of emotion. You've seen this movie before, and now you know how it ends. What's happening isn't just psychological, it's deeply spiritual. The demonic spirit that once used them to drain your energy cannot function in the presence of divine light. When you stop reacting, when you stop feeding the drama, that spirit starves. Its power fades. This is how God fights your battles, not always through confrontation, but through revelation. He doesn't just remove the narcissist, he removes their influence. You start seeing how every tactic was designed to keep you in bondage, the charm to hook you, the guilt to control you, the silence to weaken you. But now those weapons fall flat. You've outgrown the manipulation, not by force, but by faith. That's how you know the spell is breaking, because what once controlled you now teaches you. What once drained you now strengthens you. And in that quiet strength, you realize something beautiful. You don't need to fight for your peace anymore. God already secured it.
There comes a point in your journey where you can feel the shift, not just emotionally, but spiritually. It's as if the heaviness that once filled your space begins to fade away. The air feels lighter, the tension that used to sit in your chest starts to dissolve, and even the silence in your home feels different. Calm, warm, safe. That's not just healing, that's the hand of God cleansing the atmosphere. The same darkness that used to follow you, the anxiety, the sudden sadness, the constant unease, begins to lose its grip. You start to sleep better. The nightmares stop. You wake up with peace instead of dread. That's what it feels like when the spiritual residue left behind by the narcissist begins to lift. For so long, their energy lingered even after they left. The narcissist doesn't just wound you with words. They leave an imprint, a heavy vibration that clings to your space and your spirit. Every argument, every manipulation, every moment you felt powerless carried a kind of spiritual weight. But now something holy is happening. God is cleansing what they tried to contaminate. The light of His presence begins to sweep through your life, through your thoughts, your emotions, even through the walls of your home. The things that once felt dark and suffocating are now being replaced with peace, clarity, and strength. You might notice that certain songs, scents, or memories no longer trigger pain. The same corners of your room that once reminded you of arguments now feel like sacred spaces. You begin to crave stillness, prayer, and reflection. You start decluttering, not just your home, but your spirit. This isn't just emotional release, it's spiritual purification. God is removing every trace of the chaos that once surrounded you. The heaviness that wasn't yours to carry is being lifted layer by layer, and with each layer, you breathe a little easier. It's almost as if the Holy Spirit is reintroducing peace to you, reminding you what safety feels like, what calm sounds like, what freedom smells like.
You begin to understand that peace is not the absence of noise, it's the presence of God. And now that His presence is returning to your space, the darkness that once hid there can't stay. The narcissist's influence was spiritual. It left confusion, fatigue, and emotional exhaustion behind. But light always wins. When God steps in, even the air shifts. You begin to notice divine order returning where there was once chaos, harmony replacing fear, hope replacing despair. You might not even realize how far you've come until one quiet evening when you catch yourself smiling for no reason. There's no tension, no overthinking, just stillness. That's the sign you're free. What once felt like a spiritual prison has become a sanctuary. The chains you couldn't see have fallen away. The demons that fed on your pain have fled. And in their place, there's peace, real, lasting peace. The kind that only comes when God Himself has walked through your home, your heart, and your mind and said, "This belongs to me now."
There comes a moment in your journey when you realize you're not searching for closure anymore. You're searching for peace. The constant replaying of conversations, the endless need to understand why they hurt you, it all begins to fade. Instead, your soul starts craving something deeper. Stillness. He's reclaiming your heart, piece by piece, from everything that once held it hostage. For so long, your emotions were tied to the narcissist's moods. Their approval felt like safety, and their rejection felt like punishment. You didn't just love them, you were spiritually entangled with them. But when God steps in, He begins to untangle those cords. The pull you once felt toward them weakens, and instead, you feel drawn toward light, peace, and divine presence. You start to find comfort not in their words, but in prayer. You realize that the peace you were begging them for was never in their hands to give. It was always waiting for you in God's. You begin to feel that pull, the gentle call to pray, to read, to sit in quiet moments with your thoughts and let your spirit breathe again. Instead of obsessing over what they're doing or if they've changed, you start asking, what is God trying to teach me through this? That's not weakness, that's wisdom. You've shifted from reaction to reflection. You're no longer living in the storm. You're standing above it, guided by something higher than pain. Even your heart begins to change. Where there was once bitterness, there's now compassion. You don't excuse what they did, but you stop letting it define you. You stop needing revenge because peace feels better than power. You forgive, not for them, but for yourself. You release the urge to prove your worth because you finally understand it was never lost. The narcissist didn't break you. They exposed where healing was needed, and God used that pain to draw you closer to Him. This closeness feels different from anything you've known before. It's not dramatic or loud. It's quiet, steady, and real. You begin to sense God in the small things, in the calm of the morning, in the warmth of your spirit, in the clarity of your mind. You start to trust again, not in people, but in divine timing. You stop fighting for control and start surrendering to faith. That's the moment healing becomes victory. Because when you turn your pain into purpose and your confusion into prayer, you've already won the battle the narcissist thought they controlled. And that's the beauty of this final sign. When God reclaims your heart, the narcissist loses access to it forever. You're no longer driven by fear, anger, or confusion. You're driven by peace. You begin to walk differently, think differently, love differently. The chains that once bound your spirit have fallen away, and in their place, there's freedom. Not just emotional, but spiritual. You no longer seek validation from a broken person because you found fulfillment in a perfect God. This is the moment your story turns from survival to redemption. You've gone through the fire, but you didn't come out burned. You came out refined. The narcissist's control ends where your faith begins, and now your healing itself has become your victory, quiet, powerful,
and divinely protected.
There are battles we see, the arguments, the manipulation, the emotional exhaustion, and then there are the ones we don't, the invisible ones that drain the soul long before they touch the body. The truth is, behind every narcissistic attack lies a deeper war, not of flesh and blood, but of spirit. What you experienced wasn't just emotional abuse or psychological control, it was a spiritual battle aimed at your identity, your peace, and your purpose. The narcissist wasn't just a difficult person. They were being used as a vessel for something darker, something that sought to disconnect you from God's truth and make you doubt the light within you. When you met them, it may have felt like divine connection, like destiny. They seemed perfect, understanding, magnetic. But that's how darkness often disguises itself. It imitates light to get close enough to dim yours. Slowly, the illusion began to crack. Their charm turned into criticism, their affection into control, and their love into a weapon. You started to shrink, questioning everything, your worth, your sanity, your faith. That confusion wasn't random. It was the first sign that you had entered a spiritual battlefield. Narcissistic abuse isn't only emotional, it's designed to exhaust your spirit until you forget who you are. God saw it all, every tear, every silent night, every prayer you whispered when you didn't even have the strength to speak. He saw how your energy was drained, how your voice was silenced, and how your light began to flicker under the weight of manipulation. And while it felt like you were alone, heaven was already in motion. God was never blind to your suffering. He was preparing your deliverance. The narcissist thought they had control over your emotions, but they never had control over your soul. That belongs to God alone. This battle was never about who was smarter or stronger, it was about who held your heart. The narcissist wanted your attention, your devotion, your worship, things that belong only to God. That's why it felt so consuming. They wanted to replace God in your life, to become your source of validation, your definition of love, and your measure of worth. But when God steps in, He starts to break those false altars. He begins to remove everything and everyone that tries to take His place in your heart. That's why it hurts when He intervenes, because He tears down what was never meant to stand. You might have noticed how, during the worst moments of that relationship, your faith was tested. You stopped praying, you stopped believing, or you felt spiritually numb. That wasn't you losing faith. That was spiritual warfare. The narcissist's energy was meant to distract you from God's voice. They wanted you too busy trying to please them to hear the whisper of peace calling you back home. But even in your silence, God was speaking. Every time you felt something was off, every time your spirit felt uneasy, even when your mind couldn't explain why, that was discernment. The Holy Spirit warning you that you were under attack. And now something incredible is happening. God is exposing the darkness that tried to control you. The mask the narcissist wears begins to crack. The charm that once blinded others loses its power. Truth starts to surface in ways you couldn't have forced on your own. People begin to see what you always felt. That's not coincidence, that's revelation. When God decides to expose darkness, it can no longer hide behind appearances. The narcissist's lies begin to contradict each other. Their manipulations backfire. Their attempts to control you start falling apart. What once felt like a never-ending nightmare starts to lose its hold. This exposure is not meant to humiliate them, it's meant to free you. You see, God doesn't always destroy your enemies by striking them down. Sometimes He exposes them in the light of truth so their influence dies on its own. He allows their mask to fall so you can finally see who they truly are, not to shame you for loving them, but to teach you that even love must have discernment. The spiritual war you didn't see coming is now being fought on your behalf, and heaven never loses. You may still feel moments of confusion or pain, but look closer. You're not the same. The exhaustion is lifting. The heaviness that used to sit in your spirit every time they walked into the room is fading.
You're not reacting the same way anymore. That's a sign that the chains are breaking. The same spirit that once manipulated you can no longer find entry because God has sealed the doors it once used. You are beginning to see that your healing is not just recovery, it's deliverance. The enemy wanted you to believe that you were powerless. He wanted you to believe that the narcissist held all the control. But God is showing you that real power lies in peace, not in chaos. Every time you choose silence over reaction, prayer over panic, truth over confusion, you are winning the war. The narcissist's energy feeds on fear and attention. When you withdraw those, their spiritual influence starves. That's why detachment feels so freeing, because you're no longer fueling the darkness. And as you rise from the ashes of that battle, you begin to notice something else. Your discernment grows sharper, your intuition stronger, your spirit more sensitive to what's real and what's not. That's God's gift after warfare, clarity. What once fooled you can't fool you again, because the war trained your spirit. The very pain that tried to destroy you has now become your spiritual strength. You've seen darkness up close, and now you know the light that saves. The spiritual battle you didn't see coming was never meant to break you. It was meant to awaken you. You had to see the counterfeit to recognize the true. You had to face manipulation to understand divine love. You had to experience bondage to appreciate freedom. And now God is not only exposing the darkness around you, He's restoring the light within you. So if you ever find yourself looking back, wondering why you had to go through it, remember this: you were chosen to witness God's power firsthand. You were chosen to see that no weapon, emotional, psychological, or spiritual, can prosper when your faith is anchored in Him. The narcissist's power was never greater than God's plan. What they used to break you, God is now using to build you. What was meant for your destruction has become your divine preparation. You've survived the spiritual battle you didn't see coming, and that alone is proof of something extraordinary. God was always with you. You may have entered that battle unaware, but you're leaving it transformed, armored with wisdom, strength, and light. The darkness didn't win. It simply revealed how powerful your spirit truly is when it stands under the protection of God.
There comes a time when you suddenly realize something has changed, not outside you, but within. The same words that once cut deep no longer reach your heart. The same silent treatments that once shattered your peace now feel empty. The same manipulative games that used to drain you now seem almost powerless. That's not because the narcissist has changed. It's because you have. You're no longer operating in the same spiritual frequency. The power they once had over you came from emotional chaos, confusion, guilt, fear, and the need to be understood. But now, God has begun to rebuild your emotional armor. The tears that once flowed endlessly have become prayers. The anxiety that once consumed you has turned into awareness. You no longer react. You recognize. You see through their patterns, their words, their energy, and you know it's not personal. It's spiritual. This is one of the most powerful signs that the demonic tie is breaking. When you no longer absorb their emotions, their control begins to collapse. The narcissist thrives on emotional response. Your sadness feeds their ego. Your confusion fuels their illusion. And your fear gives life to their false power. But the moment you detach with peace, the demonic influence behind them begins to starve. The energy exchange that once kept you weak is now reversed. Instead of them draining you, they start to feel drained by you. Your peace becomes a weapon. Your silence becomes a mirror. God is teaching you what true strength looks like. It's not loud, not defensive, not desperate to prove a point. It's quiet, still, and spiritually aware. When you begin to walk in divine peace, you're no longer reacting from the flesh, you're responding from the spirit. That's why the narcissist's old tactics stop working. They can no longer pull you into their emotional vortex because your energy has shifted from reaction to revelation. You no longer need closure, validation, or even understanding because you found something far greater, clarity. And clarity, when it's from God, is freedom. You'll notice their presence feels different now. When they try to provoke you, there's a calmness that rises within instead of panic. When they attempt to guilt trip you, there's an inner voice that says, "No, not this time." That voice is the Holy Spirit guiding your emotions, showing you the boundaries you never had before. You start to trust that guidance more than the noise. It's not about fighting them, it's about outgrowing their reach. The more you walk in light, the less their shadow can follow you. Even your environment begins to reflect this change. Conversations that once drained you now bore you. The drama that once hooked your attention now feels beneath your peace. You begin to crave quiet, stillness, and truth. Not chaos, not conflict. You start to recognize that protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's sacred. It's how God keeps you aligned with His purpose. And when that happens, the narcissist feels it too. They sense the energetic wall that now stands between you and their manipulation. They may try harder, sudden charm, false apologies, or playing the victim, but it all falls flat. You see their performance for what it is. You no longer absorb their lies because your spirit has learned discernment. The same trap that once caught you now looks obvious. You've stepped out of the illusion. You've broken the cycle. This transformation isn't just emotional, it's spiritual warfare. God didn't just free you from a person, He freed you from a pattern of giving your power to those who never valued it, a pattern of mistaking abuse for love, a pattern of confusing manipulation with connection. And when that cycle ends, your entire energy begins to heal. You start to notice how peaceful the world feels when it's no longer filtered through pain. So if you found yourself calm in moments that used to destroy you, if you've stopped explaining yourself to people who never listened, if you've stopped seeking closure from hearts that were never open, that's not numbness, it's freedom. It's evidence that God has fortified your spirit. He has replaced your emotional vulnerability with divine resilience. The narcissist's energy no longer affects you because God has stepped between you and their control. The battle is no longer yours to fight. It's already been won. Your peace is proof.
There comes a moment when life starts to shift in ways you can't explain. People you once depended on suddenly drift away. Plans that once seemed certain begin to fall apart. Doors you were desperate to keep open begin to close. And at first, it feels painful, confusing, even unfair. But what if those closed doors are not rejection? What if they're protection? That's when heaven begins to intervene. When you've endured enough of the narcissist's manipulation, control, and emotional exhaustion, God doesn't just sit back, He steps in. You might not see it clearly yet, but divine rearrangement is already at work. What looks like loss is actually God removing access. What feels like isolation is God preparing elevation. Sometimes God has to separate you from what's hurting you before you even realize how dangerous it truly was. You may notice strange disruptions, plans with the narcissist that keep falling through, unexpected delays that stop you from meeting them, or a sudden sense of discomfort in their presence. That's not coincidence. That's heaven saying, no more. The same spiritual hand that once allowed the connection for your growth now begins to pull you away for your healing. You're being extracted from an environment that no longer matches your purpose. And it's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's subtle. The phone calls lessen, the messages stop. You find yourself too tired to chase, too peaceful to argue, too aware to go back. What's happening is spiritual alignment. God is cutting the cords the narcissist used to control you. He's silencing the demonic whispers that once kept you confused and uncertain. And when heaven moves, no amount of manipulation can reverse it. The narcissist might feel it too. Their usual tactics stop working, their energy feels blocked, and they start losing influence over your emotions. That's because divine protection has built a shield around you. Even your environment starts to shift. You may begin to see signs, verses, dreams, synchronicities, all pointing you toward freedom. You start feeling nudges to spend more time in prayer, to stay home, or to distance yourself quietly. It's not fear guiding you, it's discernment. God is redirecting your steps before the enemy can trap you again. And while the narcissist may interpret your distance as weakness or indifference, the truth is that heaven is hiding you in plain sight. You're being protected from what you can't yet see. These divine interventions can sometimes feel like chaos before they feel like peace, because when God removes something toxic, He doesn't always explain why. He just moves. And in that movement, you're called to trust. The sudden silence, the emotional detachment, the shift in energy, it's all part of your spiritual rescue. You're not being abandoned, you're being rescued. You're not being punished, you're being preserved. In time, you'll look back and realize that every closed door, every delay, and every unexpected ending was divine strategy. God saw what you couldn't see. The manipulation behind the mask, the danger behind the charm, the darkness behind the illusion. And He chose to intervene before it could destroy your purpose. So when everything begins to shift around you, don't panic. It's not falling apart, it's falling into place. Heaven is moving mountains in silence, breaking chains you didn't even know you had, and redirecting you toward a future free of control and confusion. The separation you feared is actually your salvation. God is not removing the narcissist to leave you lonely. He's clearing space so you can finally live in peace. That's what divine rescue looks like. It's not always dramatic or loud. Sometimes it's as gentle as a door closing, as quiet as a goodbye, or as calm as a heart finally at rest. Heaven doesn't shout when it saves you. It simply moves. And when it does, no darkness can follow.
There comes a moment when the narcissist's carefully crafted world begins to unravel, not because you expose them, but because God's light did. The same mask that once fooled everyone now starts to crack under divine truth. People who used to defend them suddenly start noticing inconsistencies. The ones who used to praise them now whisper, "Something feels off." It's as though the fog around them lifts, and the reality of who they are, the lies, the manipulation, the deceit, can no longer hide in the shadows. That's not karma, that's divine exposure. When God decides it's time for truth to be revealed, no amount of pretending, no amount of charm, and no web of lies can withstand His light. For so long, the narcissist built their image on illusion. They played the victim to gain sympathy, the hero to earn admiration, and the saint to mask their sins. They fed off perception, not reality. But God doesn't operate in illusion. His justice moves through truth. And when His light shines, it doesn't just reveal what's around someone, it reveals what's within them. Every hidden motive, every lie spoken in secret, every cruel action disguised as love starts surfacing. The mask begins to fracture, not because they got careless, but because divine energy makes pretense impossible. What was once hidden in darkness can no longer survive in the light. And here's the thing. You don't have to do anything to make it happen. God handles the exposure Himself. The same people who doubted you, who believed the narcissist's version of the story, will suddenly begin to see what you saw all along. It's as if their eyes are being opened, one by one. They start to witness the contradictions, the fake humility that hides pride, the charm that masks cruelty, the generosity that carries control. The illusion collapses, and truth takes its place. The narcissist's false reputation, built over years through manipulation, begins to crumble under the weight of divine reality. At first, the narcissist will panic. They'll try harder to control the narrative, to smear you again, to find new ways to look innocent. But none of it works. Their words lose power because the anointing of deceit that once covered them is gone. The spiritual veil that kept people blind is lifted. It's not just a social downfall, it's a spiritual exposure. God is not humiliating them. He's simply letting truth do what truth always does: reveal. As this happens, you'll feel an undeniable peace, not the satisfaction of revenge, but the relief of justice. You'll see how every lie that once broke your heart now turns into proof of who they really are. You'll realize that all the times you were silenced or doubted were never wasted. They were recorded in heaven. God was watching all along, waiting for the right moment to act. And when He acts, He does it perfectly. Not too soon, not too late, but right when the mask begins to suffocate under its own weight. And here's the most powerful truth. Exposure is not meant to destroy them, it's meant to stop them. God's light doesn't come to humiliate, it comes to liberate, to free those who were bound by deception, including you. The narcissist's crumbling image is a sign that their spiritual authority has ended. The false light they once carried has dimmed, replaced by the true light of God that leaves no room for deceit. Soon, the people who once doubted you will understand. The truth will stand on its own, clear and undeniable. The narcissist will no longer be able to hide behind charm, success, or sympathy, because God's light leaves no shadows. Everything hidden, every manipulation, every betrayal, every mask is now revealed for what it truly is. And you, who once felt invisible and voiceless, will finally be seen for who you truly are. Not the broken soul they painted you to be, but the survivor, the chosen one, the light that refused to be extinguished. That's the power of divine exposure. When God shines His light, no mask can survive, no lie can last, and no darkness can hide.
This is the moment heaven celebrates. The battle that once felt endless, the tears, the confusion, the exhaustion, is finally shifting. You're not just surviving anymore, you're standing in victory. The narcissist's grip, both emotional and spiritual, is dissolving under God's divine authority. What once controlled you now trembles at your peace. When God steps in, darkness loses its power. Every lie, every manipulation, every attempt to pull you back into chaos begins to collapse. The narcissist who once fed on your light now finds nothing to consume. You've become spiritually untouchable, covered, renewed, and anointed for the next chapter of your purpose. Understand this clearly. God didn't simply remove a toxic person from your life. He broke a demonic chain that was designed to suffocate your destiny. That connection wasn't just emotional, it was spiritual warfare, disguised as love, attention, or control. The enemy used that person as a vessel to weaken you, but in doing so, he accidentally pushed you closer to your Creator. Now your energy feels different. Your spirit carries divine authority. Where fear once lived, faith now rules. The areas of your life that were once drained are being refilled with holy strength. You notice that situations that used to overwhelm you now barely touch your peace. That's not coincidence. That's divine transformation. The narcissist's spiritual power has faded because their influence depended on your reaction, your energy, your empathy. When God healed those wounds and taught you discernment, their control lost its fuel. You no longer respond from pain. You respond from peace. You no longer fight to prove your worth. You know your worth because it's rooted in God's truth, not their approval.
In the unseen realm, the demons that once whispered lies about your identity have been silenced. They lost their legal right to torment you because you reclaimed your authority through God's word and presence. This victory is not loud or dramatic. It's quiet, powerful, and unshakable. You've become what the enemy feared most, a healed believer walking in divine awareness. And that's why the narcissist's world begins to crumble. Their manipulative patterns fail, their followers drift away, and their mask no longer fools anyone. What once hid in darkness is now being exposed under God's light. Every secret plan against you turns into a setup for your promotion. Every attempt to destroy your peace becomes a testimony of your resilience. Heaven's message to you now is simple. You've already won. Stop revisiting the battlefield that God has already conquered. The pain that once held you captive is now your proof of deliverance. The narcissist's downfall is not your focus, your spiritual evolution is. So walk boldly in your freedom. Protect your peace like it's sacred, because it is. Keep your connection with God strong, your boundaries clear, and your heart pure. You are no longer a victim of manipulation. You are a vessel of divine power. The demons that once celebrated your confusion now tremble at your awakening. They see what you've become, a warrior who doesn't fight with anger, but with light. Every prayer you prayed, every tear you shed has been transformed into spiritual armor. You are no longer the same. This is your final victory. The darkness lost. God won. And the proof is simple. You're free.
You'll notice it first in small ways. Things that once worked for the narcissist suddenly stop working. The people who used to believe their stories begin to question them. The charm that once hypnotized everyone now feels forced, hollow, almost desperate. It's as if the veil is lifting and the truth is finally being revealed for all to see. That's not coincidence. That's divine justice in motion. When God decides the season of deception is over, He doesn't just remove their power from you, He removes their influence from everyone around them. Their plans begin to crumble from the inside out. What they built on manipulation cannot stand in the light of truth. This is when you begin to see how God operates, not through revenge, but through revelation. He doesn't need to strike the narcissist down. He simply exposes what they've tried so hard to hide. Every false story, every illusion of control, every carefully constructed mask begins to fall apart. Their words no longer carry weight because the energy behind them has shifted. The demonic power that once fueled their confidence begins to dry up. They start stumbling over their own lies, contradicting themselves, and losing the loyalty of those who once defended them. God is dismantling their empire of illusion piece by piece, until all that's left is truth, raw and undeniable. And while this happens, you might feel an odd mix of emotions. Part of you might still remember the pain they caused and feel tempted to celebrate their downfall. But another part of you, the healed, spiritual part, will simply feel peace. Because now you understand. This isn't about revenge, it's about restoration. God is not punishing for your sake. He's balancing what was unjust. The narcissist isn't just losing people or status, they're losing spiritual power. The dark influence that once allowed them to manipulate with ease is being stripped away. They can no longer draw energy from your pain, your confusion, or your attention. That source has been cut off. You'll notice they become restless, agitated, and unstable.
The calm, confident mask they once wore begins to crack. They might lash out, seek new sources of validation, or try to provoke reactions, but nothing works like before. That's because their spiritual covering of deception is gone. The light of God now exposes every shadow. Their charm turns to arrogance. Their control turns to chaos. Their words turn against them. And the more they try to tighten their grip, the more everything slips through their fingers. This is how divine justice unfolds, not through loud punishment, but through quiet exposure. God lets them be seen for what they are. The same people they used to deceive now recognize their patterns. The same manipulation that once controlled others now isolates them. Their lies no longer attract, they repel. Every false narrative they built becomes a trap of their own making. What once brought them power now brings them downfall. And you, standing on the other side of it, begin to witness something profound. The reversal of energy. Where they once drained you, they now drain themselves. Where they once mocked your faith, they now face the consequences of underestimating divine timing. Where they appeared untouchable, they now crumble under the weight of their own choices. This is how divine justice restores order. He's showing you that no evil goes unchecked, and no injustice lasts forever. The narcissist's fall is not your victory to gloat over. It's a reminder that you were never crazy, never weak, and never forgotten. Every tear you cried became part of the evidence heaven used to move on your behalf. And now, the verdict has been delivered. The truth wins. So when you see their plans failing, when their charm fades, when their lies unravel, don't interfere. Let God finish what He started. The same hand that broke their control over you is now breaking the illusion they built around themselves. This isn't your battle anymore. It's divine correction unfolding in real time. And the most powerful part? You don't even have to lift a finger. You simply stay still, stay peaceful, and watch as God dismantles darkness piece by piece, lie by lie, mask by mask, until nothing remains but truth.